Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm your guest host today, Ken Rutsky. Now, if you're a regular listener, you're well acquainted with our guest, and normally your host, a man who needs no introduction here, Steve MacDonald. Hey, Steve, welcome to your own show.
Thank you. It's interesting to have the tables turned. I like it, though. I like it.
Now, of course, Steve has spent years interviewing hundreds of C-suite executives about growth alignment and go-to-market execution. And you know what? I'm also proud to call Steve both a colleague and a friend. So it's great to be here. Now, over that time, Steve's chats with go-to-market execs like myself reveal some really interesting patterns. And what to me is the most striking is that growth challenges aren't always caused by markets, competitors, or buyers. In fact, there rarely are, but they're caused by internal alignment gaps and really weak operational use of the voice of the customer. Amazing. So we're going to flip the script. Instead of Steve asking the questions, I'll be putting them to him, unpacking everything he's learned about things like why ABM breaks down and how AI can actually surmount the challenge of operationalizing the voice of the customer. Steve, you've asked these questions hundreds of times, and today you got to answer them. So welcome back to your own show again, Steve. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I like it. I like it.
All right. So Steve, maybe we start by just simply asking you, kind of open-ended. You've done hundreds of these calls, and what surprised you the most about where growth actually breaks down for B2B organizations?
What's interesting, we're up over 250 interviews now with B2B C-suite executives, but we also work with clients and we run podcasts for them, and we're interviewing their ideal customer profile, their lost deals, their deals in the pipeline, cold prospects, and then helping them in their go-to-market strategy. We're really heavily involved in execution as well as just having these deep conversations with
you see kind of
C-suite
both that.
executives. Yep, absolutely.
And the execution of it. Yeah.
And then I'm the chief sales officer in my company as well. So I'm in an ABM model. So we're kind of deep in this from all angles here. I guess it was the biggest surprise for me is because we always arrive at a topic for the podcasts that we do by asking a very simple question of the guests, like, what do you see as your two greatest challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth? I'm used to doing SWOT analysis and different things. And the biggest threats are outside of our walls or virtual walls of our company, right? We point elsewhere at the market and the trends and our competition and where our technology is and all that kind of stuff. But when I ask this question hundreds of times now, the answer almost always is internal. And the number one challenge that over like 70% of those C-suite executives said was internal alignment. Like the biggest challenge. Here's the good news out of this is we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we persuade the relationships, the partners, the customers that we have, the cold prospects in our business. How do we persuade them to come to our point of view? And what we should be thinking about first and foremost is what that point of view is, but how do we align? It's a very typical that like even sales and marketing aren't aligned. And buyers complain all the time. What we read online and what says on your website and then what the salespeople are talking about and then what customer success is actually delivering to us feels like three different things. That should be the easiest thing to take care of. We're all on the same team. We all get our paychecks written from the same company. So why is it so hard? That's, to me, the biggest question. Once you get these big challenges, it's like, well, okay, but now what do we do about it? What's the root cause of it? I think that's what's important.
So much to unpack there. And, to me, two things strike me. One is, how do we get alignment? But I think even before I ask how, what do we align around? And I think you have a lot of thoughts on that. I know you have a lot of thoughts on that. So do you align around what?
Well, so there's not one of those companies I've ever talked to or an executive that wouldn't agree with this statement. Yes, as an organization, we are very customer focused. We're customer first. Everybody says that. Almost nobody really executes well on that. It's not just me saying that from my conversations. McKinsey did a big study, and they found out that less than 15% of companies are actually customer focused. They don't execute on the voice of the customer. But we all know that's the highest voice of authority. That's the North Star. So when we don't have a real deep relationship and understanding and constant conversations with our customers, then what ends up happening is all of us that have risen up in our careers and are very smart people and are very capable of making decisions, we all do. As chief marketing officer, we make decisions. As a chief revenue officer, as the CEO, as the CFO, as chief product officer, we're all making our own decisions based on our own bias, where what we should do is all align around the voice of the customer. If we did that, then all of a sudden, that's the natural alignment factor. So just by actually saying we want to be truly customer focused, which means we truly want to listen to our customers and not only listen, but then act on that. It's an internal alignment factor that nobody can argue with at all.
The what is the voice of the customer.
That's the voice
And
of the
even if
customer.
before we say that, get to the how, because I know we have a lot to talk about the how, what do you actually mean when you say voice of the customer, Steve? That's a word, a term that gets thrown around left and right. And I don't
Right.
think anyone really says, what do I mean when I say voice of the customer?
When I hear that, what I think of is I want to be inside the head of the customer. The more that I can be inside of the head of the customer and truly understanding what they're thinking, what they think their challenges are, what they think their risks are, what they think is important to create success, and what they don't know. What they don't know is where they're open to having somebody come in that's really smart, that they think is a peer, that they think is a colleague, that they don't think is a vendor, they don't think is a seller. Somebody that comes in, it's like, hey, I've been there, I get it. And hey, we've tried this and that. And it brings new ideas to the party. They're open to that because not everybody has every answer. So to do that, here's the key, is you can't have voice of the customer conversations that are run through existing business processes and departments that were set up to do something totally different. I'll give you an example here. You can't get your best voice of the customer information by talking to prospects through the sales department. And this is CROs saying this too.
Too much context, right? Too much pressure, too much transaction focus, all that.
Well, the whole idea of that is it's a sales pitch. The prospect has their cards against their chest. They're not revealing. They're there to see what they can glean. Well, maybe there's something that there's important that these guys can say, but they're not opening up.
It's the dam.
It's the absolutely. And customer success conversations are the same way. Every CEO and CFO, at the end of the day, the KPI for customer success is how much did you cross sell and how much did you upsell? They are a sales organization, an internal sales organization as well. So the idea here is, and lots of CMOs and lots of CROs I talk to, they say, hey, when I come onto a new role, the very first thing I do is I just start having conversations with customers.
Right.
Right.
Hey,
I'm not
Steve,
selling anything.
Because you said something very interesting to me that I want to throw out a framework for you. I don't know if we've ever talked about this framework, but I think it was right up what you were saying. You said, if I could paraphrase you, when you get into the head of the customer about what their challenges are, and then what they don't know, meaning I know what they know, so I know what I know that they don't know. There's a framework that I've used in building sales and marketing messages, which is you have known spoken problems. So those are the ones that are easy to get to. I say, Steve, what's your problem? Oh, you know what? I'm out of gas. I got to go to the gas station. You have known unspoken problems. For that stupid metaphor, it might be, hey, yeah, Ken, my real problem is my mileage stinks. But you're not going to admit that to me because then you're admitting you bought the wrong car. But it is one of your problems that you have. And then the third one is the unknown, unspoken problems. Those can be very powerful customer motivators. Think challenger sale. The problem is if you don't start on the framework of the known spoken and the known unspoken, and you just skip right to those unknown problems, people tune out. They don't want to listen. You haven't gotten permission. What struck me about what you said is it's right in line with that framework. What do you need to know? You also need to know what they don't know.
And we don't always know what we don't or what
Right.
we need to know, right? So when we come in and we're having, so a big study that Gong did, thousands of sales conversations that were recorded, and they analyzed it, and the sales rep talked 2/3 to 3/4 of the time. We have lots and lots of meetings internally about what are the problems of our ideal customer profile and how do we solve those problems. We come in and we sell in a lane of the challenges and the problems that we solve. They don't want us. Buyers don't want us coming in our lane. They want us coming in and saying, hey, this is the world of problems and challenges that I have. And I need you to think at this level. But we don't even try to start out at that level. And we assume that we know what the problems are. We just come in with our solutions. Vendors talk like this. Partners, colleagues, peers talk out here. And that's where, as B2B selling organizations, we don't do a good job out here. We don't understand here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a whole other podcast we could do about narrative and messaging. And this is how I've lived my life for the last 15 years, thinking about this. And your obsession in a good way with the voice of the customer really adds another layer of thinking for me. I've appreciated that learning from you in the short time we've been working together. We have to capture the voice of the customer before we can operationalize that. Maybe let's talk about what are the effective ways that you've heard from these executives about how they try to do it? What's effective and what isn't? What are your ideas about how to get more effective in capturing that voice of the customer?
Yeah, and I think part of that too is answering the question of what do we want in order to capture that voice of the customer? What do we want out of that? We don't just want a deck. We don't just want a report that we can share with everybody. What we want is a relationship. Everybody agrees the world of B2B is a relationship-based business. And Sixth Sense put out that when day one, when an organization decides they need to acquire new technology or they need to bring in a new partner, they start their buying motion. That first day, they decide 4 out of 5 of the companies that they want to talk to. And 95% of the time, one of those companies is who they buy from. The voice of the customer, it has to do 2 things. It has to get in early. It has to help us establish relationships that are built on trust, as well as learn. A voice of the customer program has to have 2 very, very distinct goals: build relationships early and learn outside of our lane. Now that you know, okay, there's 2 different major objectives that I've got to accomplish here. Now, how do I do that? That's the long way around to get to your question is, how do we have long form, meaningful conversations that aren't a pitch, but are more of a conversation between colleagues, between peers? And if we can do that, that's where we open up. That's where we uncover. That's where we build relationships. The first thing that I did when I started this company, that the inspiration behind what we're getting to is you can do this through podcasting. You can get people onto a podcast and have a long form, meaningful, deep conversation about any topic. We as podcast hosts drive what that conversation is about, which was why we like that question, what's your 2 greatest challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth? It starts the conversation up here with the most important things. If there was a better way to get access to the absolutely right people that we want to create relationships with and have those deep, meaningful conversations, I'd be up for it. I just haven't found it. It's not webinars. It's not picking up the phone. It's not emailing and asking for a meeting. I haven't found anywhere close to it that's a better way just to get into those long form conversations, to understand the voice of the customer and build the relationship at the same time.
So now that's the capture. That's the capture.
That's
now
the
there's
capture.
you talked about the learning, then there's that what I call the activation, as you know, right? So let's
Yep.
go through that. So I've got to capture the information, but then
Yep.
I've got to learn from it. So maybe you can talk about that. And what are the challenges organizations, even if they could capture, let's say they've got all the gong and you take out the issue that they're sales presentations and say there's valuable customer information in there. What do I do with it after I capture it?
Yeah, so there's a ton of issues to unpack on that one. I'll start with something like really basic because everything that we're talking about here is basic. We're talking about how do we fundamentally internally align? How do we do what we know we want to do is talk to our customers more. We come out of conversations with customers, and anytime that happens, we're always like, oh my gosh, we learned so much. We got to do more of that. But we're all spread too thin. We all have a list of proactive things that we could never get to. So that comes back to answering your question, which is, what do we do? Because what happens with most learning is it stays in the minds of the people that have the conversation, and it never leaves their mind, or it becomes a transcript or a report that then is on the server. And as much as we have AI technologies and everything to access stuff on the server, Forrester put out a report. They're like, files on the server don't get accessed on average more than 10 times.
You know what, Steve? If I had $1 for every time I said to a salesperson, it's on our sales enablement portal,
yeah,
I'd be retired 10 years ago.
Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So the death of really great learning, and because if this voice of the customer learning, if it's not spread out to the teams, like high performance teams and individuals is how companies win. Back to, again, internal. We control who we hire as high performance individuals and teams. That's why VCs and private equity companies, they focus on the team first, the idea second, because they know the best idea, you got to have a good team that has a decent product or decent technology. But if you don't have the team to take it to market, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So how do we enable teams? Right. How do we enable anybody at any given time, at any given day, to have understanding of this knowledge and be able to activate it? And so this is where you get into every single person who's watching this podcast right now, I am sure, has had the question asked to them, what's your AI strategy? You go into the board meetings as a C-suite executive, or your CEO looks at you as the CMO or the CRO, and they're like, hey, Ken, what's your AI strategy, right?
By the way, Steve, we made it 18 minutes without using the AI word, which might be a world record for a podcast taped in 2020. Here we are. So let's go. So what's your AI strategy?
Well, so here's the AI strategy is that it's not the long form conversation. If I handed a bunch of people a half an hour video or a big transcript or a report or even an article that came out of it or something like that, it's not usable content for teams. What you do first is you go into these podcasts and you've got to have, again, goals. What's your goal with getting voice of the customer? What kind of information do I want out of this? What kind of information for my sales enablement, for the sales team, do they really, really need? We figure out how to make it really accessible to them. Even before AI, just what do they need? So our recommendation always to our clients is, first off, there's 3 top 5 lists that we've got to nail. And we've got to totally understand. We all got to come into an agreement because they're our North Star for when we're talking to your customers and your prospects and lost deals. Here's the first top 5 list is, what are the objections that kill deals in our pipeline? Those are some of the most important things that the sales team is dealing with absolutely every single day. They're the things that really inhibit our demand gen campaigns because there are objections that aren't voiced because those are people that we're trying to influence. We take those and we put a framework around them. We reframe them in a way that allows the voice of the customer to answer that question. Because this is like the truth that nobody really wants to know, is sales conversations are becoming less important until the very end of the cycle.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah.
Right? Because they don't want to talk to us. Right. And we are not trusted. Anybody inside of a selling organization, we are the lowest form of life in terms of trust. And that's not me saying it. I've had it reverberated to me many times in these conversations, but plenty of studies like by a McKinsey, the trust barometer, right? It comes out every year. The most recent one, 68% of respondents said business leaders were literally purposely misleading. and exaggerating and grossly exaggerating. You could have the best set of values and morals ever, but you're lumped into the world of B2B selling organizations, and we're not believed. That lack of trust, Forrester put it out, their predictions for this year was that trust was going to be the currency to close deals. And if you don't have it, A, you don't get onto that list up front. If you don't get onto that list up front, you're not on. You're out in the cold. You're left behind. But we need to develop trust by using the voice of the customer behind our voice to support it. So I always say this to,
So the first list, top 5 objectives.
Okay, top 5 objectives. The other one is, what are the top 5 unique go-to-market elements, the selling statements that we make in meetings where we can raise eyebrows? Everybody goes, oh, I didn't quite think about it that way. If it's tantalizing enough, we can raise eyebrows. But if we take those statements and we have them validated by the voice of the customer, the peer community, their peer community, who they trust implicitly, all of a sudden, our unique go-to-market statements that sell our company, now we're bringing to the party the research that they're doing before they want to talk to us and serving it up to them on a silver platter and saying, this isn't just us. This is the same people that have your job at the same companies are saying are the smartest things to do. As many times as we can, bring in, like I have in this conversation, to validate what Steve says, because if Steve says something important, but nobody else is validating that, then well, how much do we trust Steve? But when we say, well, when McKinsey said and Forrester said, we bring in voice of the market, we bring in voice of the customer as support systems, literally support structures underneath the voice of the business. So when we say the things that are provocative, the things that raise eyebrows, the things that buyers then want to have the second, the third, and fourth conversation, they're going to close business, that we are giving our voice as much a chance to be heard, to be trusted, so that we can stay in deals and close deals.
Okay, so two things. Voice of the customer. So 100%. I've done a lot of work in cybersecurity, and boy, you go ask 100 CISOs their opinion on marketers, and you might as well ask them about their opinion on Hades. It's just so bad. But if one of their peers says, vendor XYZ delivered this and solved this problem for me, you cannot put a value on that. That is beyond gold. The second thing is the value. What are the top 5 things we can do for the customer? What are the top 5 objections they have? We want to get the voice of the customer integrated into how we answer those questions or talk about that value. Third list
is, what are truly the top 5 challenges that they have, and not the ones that are in our lane, their top 5 challenges. Because if we come in talking about their top 5 challenges, then they see it as more of a holistic partner and not a point solution, not a vendor. None of us want to be vendors. We want to be partners. Well, we better start acting like partners. We better start acting like we get this, not this.
Yeah, and I mean, in my experience, 2 of the most credible things you can do as a vendor, right, is one, say, no, I don't help you with that problem, but here's how my other customers have done it. Or the second one is, here's how we would work together to make that other thing even better. If you have that access to the problems that you don't solve, you can turn those into powerful sales and marketing motivators also.
Yep. Here's the thing. We don't typically know their list of their top 5 challenges. Because if we come in talking 2/3 to 3/4 of the time in our prospecting conversations or sales conversations about our lane, about here's the things that we do to help you, and then the 25% of the time they reply back, they're replying to what we said. We don't really have a system in place to understand truly what they think their challenges are. But we need to. Why, you ask that question? What are your 2 greatest challenges for creating long-term sustainable growth? It's not leading. It's open-ended, intentionally, on purpose. The whole idea, if you talk to anybody about how do you define your ideal customer profile, you truly deep understanding of their problems, their challenges. Yet we don't have a mechanism to really understand them.
Awesome. Okay, so we got these three things that we're trying to learn. We learn them all through our conversations,
Yep.
and we use podcasts as one of the data sources for that. And you talked about using AI in order to get it operationalized, but we kind of didn't get there. Let's talk about that because this is where AI can change the dynamic within the organization for alignment and learning. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So you got to first design what you want, and then can AI help? Instead of the world right now is like AI is going to change this world, we bequeath it that's going to help. And what ends up happening is a lot of times it makes us more efficient, which,
Or it just
and
tells us what we want to hear.
right, right. Exactly. And by the way, the stats are still all the same. Like 85, 90% of AI installations don't work. The promise is there and we all still believe it, but we don't know how to implement it. And one of the big reasons is we don't define the use cases for what we want. It's help. What do we want? Oh, can AI help us? Instead of AI is going to be a huge help, how do we insert it into what we're already doing? First, what is the use case that we want it to do? Here's what I want it to do. And so I think about the big issues like over 2/3 of content marketing creates sales doesn't even care about. They don't think has any value. We've created this entire marketing department. We have a lot of people working really hard doing stuff to help them. I want to create as a marketer content that sales has to have. They can't live without it. It's so good, right? Those lists of objections, if it helps them address objections that are killing deals in their pipeline, they're going to be raising their hand for more, right?
More, give me more.
Right. Yeah. So we identified those lists, those top 5 lists are get us in at least the right direction of the kind of content that they need. So that's the first thing. Second thing, they don't need long form content. They don't want another blog post, another ebook. I'm not bagging on that. There's definitely roles for that. There's roles for that. What they want is, hey, I just got out of a meeting with this company. Oh, they brought up objection number 3, and now I got to bridge that objection. I got to like really address it and try to get the next meeting. What I need is I need to be able to very simply, in a very tight, small email, follow up and say, hey, thanks for the call yesterday. And you brought up a really good point. Here's 2 or 3 things to think about. I'd like to set up another call.
Oh,
Right.
and by the way, here's what one of my customers said about it. Boom,
So
video.
that's it. So now you're bringing in what I call the triad. How do I bring into that email our point of view, the voice of the business, but support it by a single quote, right? From a voice of the customer, or maybe a single quote, a statement of fact that's this long from the voice of the market that leaves that prospect thinking, oh, I can't ignore this. What Ken is saying as a sales guy is supported by my peers and some of the biggest consulting firms in the world. Okay, maybe I need to think about this. I think about this as how do we take the voice of the customer and the voice of the market and the voice of the business? How do we bring them down to single statements that can be assembled together in the smallest forms of communication to make them really powerful?
And not to make the commercial for content strategies, but that's essentially what we're building with the AI infrastructure that you've
That,
developed and rolled out to your
yes.
customers. I can go in and say, here's an objection, help me fight it, help me solve it in real time by using the voice of the customer or the voice of the market and in alignment with the value we can deliver. Boom, there's your 2-paragraph email with a quote from a customer and a link to a video clip.
Yep. So think about it this way. Marketing and sales sat down originally and we co-decided what those top 5 lists are. Like, guys, what are your top 5 objections? What are the ones that are really painful? And they agree. And then we're like, okay, those are the ones we're going to help you support. Think about going into an AI tool. Ours is the AI Navigator. Going in and going into the main navigation under buyer intelligence. And then you got objections, challenges, validations. You're that salesperson that had objection number 3. You go into the tool, main navigation, buyer intelligence, objections number 3. And each one of those, we've created a framework. The voice of the business reframes the objection. We'll have it said in a number of different ways, but what's the most important way that we can eloquently frame that so that it has deep meaning, provocative, that you say that to any one of our buyers, they're going to be like, yep, that's it. How do we reframe it as the voice of the business? When we talk about it, we're talking about it. Then how do we affirm it by the voice of the customer? And how do we prove or validate it by the voice of the market? Now, when you go into buyer intelligence, objections, objection number 3, you land on a page that has individual single quotes, single sentences of voice of customer, voice of business, voice of market. Scan through them and go, oh, click, checkbox, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, start prompt. And it's taken those, and now those are the ones, maybe you have 6 or 7, and you say, okay, now I need to write an email, right? And then there's an email prompt in there that you can put in your key takeaway. But what you've done is you've boiled this world of voice of the customer, your voice, the voice of the business, the voice of the market, the people that are most trusted, and you've allowed it to boil it down to where it can just be click, 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 write me the email, and now I'm on my way. Very powerful communication if we just break it down into its component parts, little statements, quotes, and facts, and make them easily accessible and use AI to then use our sales email prompts. You can do the same thing for articles or ebooks and things like that too.
Right. Very cool. Okay, so we're getting long here. It's been an awesome chat. I have a few. I'm going to really make you the guest now, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to start the spot. This is the rapid fire section. I'm going to give you 3 last questions, right?
Okay.
First one is, what's the most important topic in the context of this conversation today that you don't think we've mentioned yet? I told you I was going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. What we haven't done, I think we lightly touched on it, but one of the things that this process, like going through those top 5 lists, and it helps companies align internally because we agree on things that we didn't even ask ourselves to agree on. Things as important as what are the top 5 objections where we lose deals. If you go into a company and you ask 5 salespeople, 5 marketers, and the executive team, you're going to get wildly different answers. Just by thinking what we want the targets of this kind of a program to be, it forces us to align. It forces us to say, those are the most important things. We agree. Using this program to create more internal alignment is one of the biggest benefits that is most undervalued or undersold.
Awesome. Okay, second rapid fire. What are you the most proud of in the context of either your career or in what you've built at Content Strategies or anything else you want to say?
I would say raising my kids, but
well, me too. But yeah, we have that in common. We both have gaggles of kids. But anyways, outside of that,
about 2 months ago, one of my clients, and we were talking about the next year's budgets. She said one thing to me that, like, I just so proud of. She said, Steve, this program, this ABM podcasting program, is the most important thing I've ever done in my career.
Wow. Wow. I file that away in the attaboy file that I look at when I'm having a bad day.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. It's like your kids coming and saying, Dad, I really appreciate you for this reason. And you're like, nobody ever says that as a
I'm
kid,
going to write
right?
that down and not forget it. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Last rapid fire question, Steve. I'm a big podcast listener, as you know, mostly about cycling and politics, but let's do it in this context. 1 minute, biggest key takeaway for sales and marketing leaders from this podcast.
Put aside every preconceived notion that you have about podcasting right now. This isn't about reach and downloads and creating great blog posts. This is all about taking any relationship that is important to building your business and initiating that relationship or enhancing that relationship, whether it's a customer that is your biggest revenue expansion opportunity and bringing them onto the pipeline. The audience for this podcast is the guest. Everything else is icing on the cake.
Awesome.
So that's what my big takeaway would be is how do you work on the relationships that are most important to your business? We've even brought cantankerous board members onto the podcast,
Yeah, I know a
right?
few of them.
Yes. So if you think about it that way, it's about building relationships and building reciprocity in that relationship and trust in that relationship. That's what this is all about.
And I would say my number one biggest takeaway from this is that the voice of the customer is the true north. And I think throughout my career and through most sales and marketing executives I know, they've said that, but they've never been able to operationalize it. And now with the tools we have and the inventions that frankly Content Strategies has made, you can capture, learn, and operationalize the voice of the customer in a way that you've never been able to do before. If that's not a goal of yours, that's cool. And the way we met is I was in an operating role and you pitched this service to me and I was ready to go, but then I left that job. So,
So we decided to partner together.
I am really a true believer because what I realized is I've been kidding myself that I could really capture the voice of the customer in the way I operated before. So to me, if you do it this way, if you do it another way, you've got to figure out how to capture, learn, and operationalize the voice of the customer if you want to win in the marketplace. That's my biggest takeaway.
And by the way, Ken, how did we meet?
You invited me onto this podcast.
We started a relationship, right?
Episode 2, I don't know what the number is, but I'm there somewhere. If you look at it. All right, Steve, thank you. And to all our listeners, I hope you enjoyed me putting Steve on the hot seat, and we'll see you at the next podcast.